Speak to our hearts, to calm our ears and open them that we may receive the inspiration that He wishes to give to us as we come now to meditate on the Word of God. I came across, just following through what was given actually as today's reading, something which, following on what we're discussing this morning, is still relevant. It's in the Apocalypse, and we have here the beginning of chapter 15. And I saw in heaven another sign, great and wonderful. 7 angels were bringing the 7 plagues that are the last of all, because they exhaust the anger of God. I seemed to be looking at a sea of crystal, suffused with fire. And standing by the lake of glass, those who had fought against the beast and won, and against his statue and the number which is his name. They all had harps from God, and they were singing the hymn of Moses, the servant of God, and the hymn of the Lamb. Now, Moses led them through the Red Sea, and there's this canticle which goes back to early times, still sung in the liturgy about once a fortnight or so on a Saturday. And we have therefore this element of a genuine battle and arriving safe after a fight, agonia, on the other side. And we tend to forget that, even in the priesthood, that actually we are, as it were, generals in a battle. And we haven't got time to sit back and unfold our arms. We need to be aware that this battle is actually of cosmic importance. It is said that a doctor has a small cemetery on his conscience. I heard it in France. On dit que chaque médecin a un petit cimetière sur la conscience. In other words, his mistakes. Well, a priest can't afford to have one single mistake on his conscience when it comes to an immortal soul. Because to lose a soul, as we just saw this morning towards the end of the story, in a flicker of time like that, when in the electric chair, if he had not had that very strange experience, he was actually going to that place that he was shown. And only a few seconds later, he would have been there and would be there right now. And it's an awful reality which people don't want to face. And it's not politically correct, not ecclesiastically correct almost, to speak about it, especially in public. Oh, come off it. Well, if we take that away, why should we be priests at all? What's the point? It's the issue. And the fact that this is not discussed much is not indifferent. It's not just a question of evolution in society. There's more to it than meets the eye. So this is first-hand evidence. Who's behind it and why? You've heard of the famous exorcist of Rome, Gabriel Amort. He's still alive, but he's no longer functioning because of his age. But we know quite a bit of things about this demonic world through him. In a recent, when this has been written, interview, he had manifested some things. To fight in a battle, is it not prudent and necessary to know not only your own weapons, tactics and strategy, but also the weapons, tactics and strategy of the enemy? It was recounted to Pope John Paul II that the Vatican's chief exorcist, Father Gabriele Amort, quote, knows too many bishops who do not believe in the devil. By the way, I heard recently, just talking to somebody in Ireland, there had been a case in one archdiocese in Ireland, just recently, where there was a house full of stuff going on, and therefore, if it's serious and things won't calm down, you have to get a priest, and sometimes you have to get actually an exorcist, if it's the real thing. And this was one of those big cases. And so, it's very difficult to get hold of an exorcist now, but you can still get hold of one in Ireland, and there was one functioning in the northwest, and he had all the credentials, he had all the backing of those responsible for him to do this ministry. But because it was a local one involving a house, it wasn't just a place going to him, but he had to come to the house in the diocese. The Archbishop had to be informed, and he had to give his permission. And he simply said, not in my diocese. So, and it's a big archdiocese. So that's what we're up against. Now, the Pope himself replied bluntly, anyone who does not believe in the devil does not believe in the gospel. When asked, what do you see as Satan's greatest success? Padre Gabriel Amort replied, the fact that he has managed to convince people that he does not exist. He is almost managing. Even within the church, we have a clergy and an episcopate who no longer believe in the devil, in exorcism, in the exceptional evil the devil can instill, or even in the power that Jesus bestowed to cast out demons. And they no longer believe in the devil. We have entire episcopates trying to counter exorcism. We have countries completely devoid of exorcists. Now this actually has got better since this interview took place. There has been re-establishment of them, and when this was being recorded, the list includes Germany, Austria, Switzerland, Spain and Portugal. I don't know whether Holland fits into that or not, but they're kind of important countries. And it was very difficult also at the time to get them in Ireland. I mean, they were, but it was very difficult. Anyway, he says this is a shameful shortfall. Now, just to follow on from that first remark, which is not Gabriel Amort himself, but the person giving an account of this, that in a battle, we need to know the tactics of the enemy. You know that, are you maybe just of the generation who would have found, no, you wouldn't be of the generation of, because this country has suffered a lot, hasn't it, in the last, because this heart of Europe there, but Holland was close to Germany and must have had an awful time, but the way that Hitler had power is itself mysterious, isn't it, where he got all this power in a short time. And the same applies, of course, to Lenin and that whole movement before the Bolshevik Revolution. But it would seem that there was something a bit Celtic and pre-Christian in the SS. Himmler, who was important as head of the SS, he had some strange personal beliefs, and it was spooky. And this order to explode this particular castle where stuff had been going on and hidden is interesting. Question mark of history, will we ever know? Or what was behind that strange fight against essentially Catholic Church? What else it was down to? And grace, anything to attack grace, sometimes has horns beneath it, even when it's political in form. Likewise, as we know, earlier still in France, going back to the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, the success that the government there, Emil Coleman and company, had with regard to the Catholic Church, getting out religious teachers' orders from the country in a very short time, in a very Catholic country. It's spooky. And we know that, in fact, Curé Vaz, he met actually, because I think Emil Coleman had been a seminarian, they came to see him when they were young, and he looked at him, and very poor man, it did a lot of harm to the church. You could see it all ahead. But anyway, it would seem that the Masonic Lodge there, Grand Orient in Paris, they were very important in all this underground stuff, which eventually became politically effective. And it would seem that actually it was more directly satanic than people actually realized. There was a slight infiltration. I believe a Dominican was able to wriggle through with permission to see exactly what was going on. And he was actually present at one of their meetings through a contact he had, completely in camouflage. And he was able to see how actually satanic it was and what was going on. At a certain point, his friend whispered to him, "It's him." And before them was apparently a man. He came out of nowhere. But it was actually Lucifer. And he was saying, right, this is the next step. So he alone has the intelligence to tell man what to do in a way that will work. So we're handling here what was the most brilliant, beautiful, glorious creature, Lucifer, in prehistory. And he knew it. That was, of course, his fall, pride. And this, he didn't have that fullness of beatific vision and glory that was to be his until, it would seem, he had actually gone through some kind of test. And it was this, they were shown, it seems, the incarnation in the future way down, and they refused. Non serviam, they would not. And of course this owning of glory which was theirs, which was huge, the power that they had. And this notion to want to own it and to have one's own self-centered glory and kingdom, it's still there in man. Every fundamental sin of pride is something of that. And so it was instantaneous and irreversible. And it would seem that Satan did not really, even for one split second, imagine that God, who was fundamental goodness, kindness, glory, goodness, and diffusion of this goodness to others, could even imagine having anything but goodness in the universe. He'd get away with it. Of course, it was not to be. So there was this huge battle, which foreshadows the battle that we have every time we have a dying person. Battle in which all eternity was in suspense, and it would seem that Satan, who was hugely powerful, wanted all these angels, they're a huge, huge number, to come with him and have their own kingdom. And of course, Michael, this reaction then of fundamental truth, which is humility, who is like God? Michael. And so we have this then correct vision that it's all received, and he was given more power. And there was this huge battle going on in which this was saved. Only, when it's enough, only a third was lost. But they are lost, and they're there, they're around, and they hate us with a perfect, perfect hate. And they can't bear this thought that they have lost these places, that we're going to get them in their place. So that's the battle. And the tactics, therefore, come from the fact that he's retained all his angelic faculties of intelligence. But they're all now in reverse, for our harm. But they're far more intelligent than us, which is therefore something which makes a lot of sense when it comes to warfare. Because, as we know, when it came to 1944, Hitler had huge advantages in Europe. And to get at him inland was militarily going to be extremely expensive and possibly a huge disaster. But how did it work? It was done essentially not with the power of arms, but with the power of intelligence. Because they managed to find a way of getting Hitler to believe something which he would really believe, and believing it would act upon it, and therefore would give false strategies, so that that's actually creating a weak point where they can actually get in. And so they gave spies, they gave, well, people who were parachuted into Germany, into occupied France, false information, which they believed in. And they foresaw that if they were parachuted there, in these places, they would be taken, enough of them anyway, a portion of them, and the consequences would be inevitable. They would be tortured until they cracked. Probably not all would ever crack, but some proportionally would. And the truth, the false truth, then filtered through to the Führer that there was going to be a decoy, that the real débarquement was going to be the Pas-de-Calais, and that the thing that was going to come first of all was to draw his attention so that he would get away all these panzer troops from the north and so on. Of course, it was all false, and it worked. But it worked because they had thought out what is likely to be effective. So Satan was infinitely more wise and prudent and intelligent than we are. In reverse, he's doing something similar, but on a grand scale. And we're sitting back and playing his game quite happily. We, the priests, and we're passing the buck. Oh, it's the bishop's fault. No! We, on the ground, are the one to bear the responsibility. And only priests become bishops anyway. So we need to know exactly how much he's involved, and what he's trying to do, and how he succeeds. So this is information which, if you like, has been pulled out from torture, because exorcism is demonic torture. And exorcists are close to the front line. They're on the front line, hand-to-hand combat. And it's the real thing. You don't have to believe everything that comes out in exorcism, but there are patterns coming where different exorcists find the same answers coming back. We have enough evidence to know the enemy's way of operating, because the devil himself is a creature, and under certain circumstances has also to obey his creator, in the person of the authorized exorcist, who invokes all the powers of heaven, including our Blessed Lady, and it goes therefore into major pressure, and eventually things reluctantly come out. So this is evidence of the kind of thing the devil himself is up to in our day. In 1994, a holy priest died. He was a monk, I believe Benedictine, of the Abbey of San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice. His name was Father Pellegrino Maria Ernetti. He was born in 1925. Now there, he had a quiet ministry, and he had a very powerful ministry. He received hundreds of people each week to undergo exorcism. He was known for his biblical and theological studies. His knowledge of the various sciences was noted, and it constituted sound points of reference for the faithful who came to him not only from all over Italy, but also from outside the country, because he was the most prepared exorcist of our time. Now, this holy priest, in an interview with a journalist whose name was Vincenzo Speziale, said, "Today, evil," and all of us lamented, "is spreading ever more throughout the world, and in the most varied and refined manifestation." Now, this is all stuff to be aware of as priests, because we're handling young people and so on into things that they don't realize what they're doing with. Who reacts to this? Who fights this? Who takes up the arms of the faith? One cannot pretend to plant the good seed, and that can then put down its roots and produce fruits, if we have not first tilled this soil, eliminating the thorns and the bramble of the devil. In vain could we be doing any pastoral effort which does not understand this tactic of spiritual work, because the elect are those who have beaten the dragon in the blood of the Lamb. That's the language of the Apocalypse. Pastoral work begins here, and it does not consist in constructing large buildings, oratories, parish works, etc., when the priest is not found anymore in the confessional. So now that's familiar, isn't it? How empty some of the confessionals are. Now that's really the trench. Because today, with various excuses, the priests are no longer available to the soul. Now that's what I was saying this morning. Our real business is soul business, not paper business. They no longer confess. They consider the confession as the last thing. This is a mistake, because it is the great sacrament that we have. It combats against the devil, washing the souls in the blood of Jesus. Confession not only takes away the sin of the soul, but it gives us an armour with which we can fight against the devil. Regarding this, I have a terrible experience. Because many people, I don't know by your experience, but I suppose in this position I've been there as a hermit, many simple people come. In Ireland, we've got lots of simple people with simple faith. I mean travelling people. They're in Ireland, something that corresponds to the gypsies that you have in Romania, but it's not the same at all. They're quite different. They're Irish, but they have a very simple faith. And they believe in the devil. Even the young people, they believe in the devil. But there's a problem. Although lots of them, and even the young ones, do come and specifically ask for confession, fair play, and they're good confessions, sincere. A lot of them also don't go that far, but they want a blessing. Well, okay, you can bless a person, but you can't fix a bit of a soul. You have to have the whole person healed, and the person has to be completely in a state of light, peace, and warmth. And that means sacramental grace returning if there's something missing somewhere along the line. So that's the first issue when we're handling a person. It's not just psychology, our business. We have in our hands what no psychologist has, the means of real healing. If you heal the conscience, something deep happens. Peace at last returns, and then you can start working on the other levels. Thus, let us run to this great sacrament frequently. Who purifies us of our sins? The blood of Christ. Who sanctifies us? The blood of Christ. Who gives us the strength to fight against our spiritual enemies? The blood of Christ. But who administers the blood of Christ if there are no priests available in the confessionals? They think about the cars, think about running to the right or to the left, let alone other sinful things. What does the devil like? What does he dislike? Father Pellegrino answered, "Now listen carefully. The exorcists have not thought about what I have been forced to do. Because if they all would have done this, at this moment, we could have had volumes on what the devil likes and dislikes. After having exorcised a person from Austria, I began to record, with the help of my collaborators, everything. And so, little by little, emerged from many exorcisms a catechesis of the devil. I implore you to publish all of it, because perhaps it will be the high point of all the other questions. Let us begin with what the devil likes. So, in this meditation, I'll just do what the devil likes. This evening, I'll do what he dislikes. Here we have something which links us to what we had the other day from Maria Simma, the host in the hand. The devil is quoted here, "So that I can trample on your God, that God which I killed, and I can celebrate my masses with my priests which I snatched from him." And so they love to get these consecrated hosts. They're on the black market. You can actually apparently find strings and things on the internet. If they're consecrated by the Pope, they cost even more, this kind of thing. And they have to have a certain number every month. And they're disappearing all the time. And in some churches, quite often you'll find a host on the ground, precisely what the devil loves. In fact, just the other day, I heard from a person, a close friend of hers, that had to stop in conscience going to one of the churches, the church where she would normally go to. Because every time she was finding afterwards, after people had all gone, one or two hosts on the floor. She couldn't bear it anymore. Number 2, priests dressed as street cleaners, camouflaged, so that I can lead them where I want, in hotels and in private houses, in search of women and of homosexuals, and I may make them commit many sacrileges. And I bring them into my kingdom. How many camouflaged priests are in my kingdom, and they will no longer escape from me. There's laughter on the tape itself. Cold laughter. 3, the priests and the bishops enrolled in the Freemasonry and in my sects. How many there are that I carry away with money and with women. How many become my faithful friends with money and with women. I take as many as I want. I bring them to my kingdom. 4, the miniskirts, with which I ensnare men and women, and I fill up my kingdom. What happiness, what joy. 5, the television. The television. It is my device. I invented it in order to destroy the single souls and the families. I separate them. I break them up with my subtle and penetrating programs. The television is the center of attraction with which I draw in so many priests, brothers and sisters, especially in the late hours. And then I do not let them pray. In an instant, I present myself in the whole world. They listen to me, and they all see me. My faithful servants help me greatly. The sorcerers, the witches, the fortune tellers, the palm readers, the astrologers. And on he goes. And then you've got this laughter, and the commentary says it is nothing like human laughter. Mel Gibson has captured it in the scene of the death of the bad thief, when his soul goes not like the other two, but in the other direction, and it goes down. The bowels of the earth open, and it goes down and down and down. And the last scene is the devil's a horrible, horrible monster with a satanic grin. Swallowing it up, I've got you. And that's the ugliness that we have to do with. Brilliant intelligence in reverse, wanting our harm with a perfect hate, and wanting to have our company in his bad company forevermore. It has been said by some that what the Apocalypse refers to as the image of the beast is in some way, right now, the television. Because it's the throne of Satan, right in the hearth of even Christian homes and even monasteries. Six, discotheques. How beautiful. They are my golden palaces where I attract the best hopes of the society, which I make mine, destroying their souls and their bodies. How many thousands and thousands I carry away with me with alcohol, with drugs and with sex. Oh, what a continuous harvest. I have entrusted them too many politicians, my faithful servants, and so on. I am the king of the world, and not formerly your God, my crucified. And you can't now anymore really let a young person, if that person is genuinely asking advice, go to a disco, because they're so structured, the proper ones now, that it is obviously and evidently satanically orientated. There are very strange things going on there. It's not as it was when we were young. It's actually fundamentally evil, and they have to be aware of that before they get involved. You can't go close to evil and not get contaminated. Seven, divorce, the separation of the married couples. This was invented by me. Of it I demand the property. It is one of my most intelligent discoveries. In this way I destroy the family, and I destroy the society. But I am adored as the true king of the world. Sex, sex. Do not listen to that man nailed to the cross who does not give you anything. The true pleasure I give to you with free sex. My kingdom is above all the freedom of sexual pleasure with which I reign on the earth. Now, does that sound familiar? It's the carrot held out even on anything that one opens up practically, from publicity to something on internet. One is immediately solicited by strange things coming out of nowhere, popping up, and there at one click of a finger. And how many resist with that click of a finger? Even at an early age. And then they're hooked, addicted to the porno for the rest of their life. And of course, unstable families do not help when it comes to stable souls being brought up, and therefore to stable candidates for the priesthood. It's difficult to find now young men who are coming from a stable background. 8. Abortion, the killing of the innocent. Hurrah! Hurrah! It was my most beautiful and tasty ideal to kill the innocent instead of the guilty. And the mafia killers, I destroy humanity. And in this way they end before being born, the adorers of your false god. Hurrah! Hurrah! 9. Drugs. It is the most delicious food that I make the youth eat to make them crazy. And in this way, I make them do as I want. Thieves, assassins, lustful, fierce like me, dominators of the world, my ministers. It's very sad, this drug culture, because it hits where you wouldn't expect it to. It starts innocently, in inverted commas, and then it's, because of contacts, very quickly they're hooked onto habits which then become very, very difficult to break. And of course they're expensive habits. And whereas a female has the resource of the misuse of her own body to get money, the male has not, and it leads very quickly to dishonesty and crime. And it's a very, very dangerous world, with deadlines and all that goes with it. So it's an extremely violent underground world. And good people get sucked into it as a foretaste of getting sucked into the devil's claws in the beyond. The Apocalypse has mention of one expression, pharmakeia. Now that could be some kind of distant allusion to drugs. Number 10. But above all, I like and I am delighted by those bishops and those priests who deny my existence and my work in the world. And there are many. Oh, what joy! What joy for me! Secure and tranquil work. Even theologians today do not believe in my existence. How beautiful! And in this way, they even deny that God who came in order to destroy me. Instead, I won. I nailed him to the cross. Well done, these priests. Well done, these bishops. Well done, these theologians. They are my faithful servants. I do with them as I please. But now they are mine. I lead them where I wish, dressed as grave diggers, with the cigarette always in the mouth, perfumed like ladies' men, in search of easy women, with the car of the latest model, full of money. They rebel at the dogmas of their false God and their false church, of that my crucified victim. They are the most secure soldiers of my kingdom, full of themselves. With them I instill confusion and loss in the people, who distance themselves evermore from the false God. And I lead them to my kingdom of hate and of eternal desperation forever with me, with me. How many of them I have enticed to enlist in my sects, allured by my career and by my money. I easily buy them, because I have finally succeeded in making them no longer love their false God, nor that woman who pretends to have defeated me. He has a perfect hatred for our Blessed Lady, who took his place as the most glorious creature. He knows it. He never uses her name, so it was that one, that woman. Number 11. The politicians who declare themselves Christian. But they are not Christians because they are mine and in my service. Presenting themselves as Christians, they deceive many people who follow them where I astutely lead them. They come with me to happily steal money from the people, money which costs sweat and tears of hard work, many of it from the poor families, with iniquitous taxes imposed by these politicians who get fat, waste, spend and spread without limits. And yet I make them make declarations of rectitude, of goodness, of deference, of loyalty, and of Christian sincerity, to the point of causing even priests and bishops to fall with them. Money is my most efficacious weapon. Priests and bishops close their eyes on these politicians, my servants and slaves. It is enough that they find the money to build or restore churches, nurseries, beautiful and comfortable parish houses, patronages. They are my most faithful sacristans, by means of which I can penetrate into the houses of the clergy, obedient to my money. In the end, was it not these politicians who signed the adultery of divorce and abortion? But my clergy, they are the ones who provide the propaganda that I desire. Now, it has emerged in a series of exorcisms that right now the greatest collaborators of the demon are the most unexpected. It's actually people working for the Lord, notably priests who don't realize the power they have to be worked upon also by the demon, because they're the ones that Christians will listen to. So it's extremely clever, the weaponry of the devil, tactic warfare. It's actually this intelligence of which we were speaking at the beginning that won the war against Nazi Germany. So just to be aware, we have to be aware exactly how he can use us if we're not careful, often by getting us not to approach certain issues, because if one does, what will happen? People will get at us. If one starts talking about certain things, the devil will use somebody of which he has some kind of, not control, but influence, to make a noise, a complaint. And over the church, we get into a situation of political correctness where certain things must not be preached against. That's how he gets away with it. And it can be quite violent, in the sense that the priest can be actually moved elsewhere. Just the other day, I was called urgently to Dublin, because they'd always had, for a good many years, a First Friday celebration, a sung Mass in Latin with an all-night vigil throughout the night, of Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, and they always had to have the Mass first in Latin, and they had a full choir prepared. But the priest who always used to do it, because he'd been too orthodox, and the immediate issue had been this, that he did not want the children coming up automatically like that from school, even if they weren't going to church on a Sunday to receive the Blessed Sacrament. There ought to be confession first and so on, and that the teacher or teachers were annoyed and made a complaint to the Archbishop, and the Archbishop made a phone call to his Superior General, put him on a sabbatical year or something of that nature, and off he went himself. So that was the end of danger of being the end of Latin Mass, as a side effect. So that's what we're up against. It's subtle. It's subtle, but it's there. So, to destroy the church is my first and ideal project. He goes on to judges and magistrates, and on to sects. Now, sects, we need to be aware of, is something that is more complex than we realize. Nowadays, there's a weakening of complete catechetical formation, so people, rather than not believe anything, believe everything. And so they get into a syncretistic form of religion, which includes bits of other stuff coming often from the Orient. And it's a mixture of Christianity and sort of Buddhist, Hinduistic stuff coming under the form of New Age. And because there is real energy around in this, they get into it because of the good effects of this energy. And you've got, therefore, nuns involved, you've got people who give parish property over for the use of these things, and then you've got the consequences. Then they come to us, because actually people who are initiated in certain things like Reiki, they're actually opening themselves to channeling energy, which is a real energy, but actually it's not at all from the Holy Spirit. And it has this immediate effect of healing. That's how the devil works. He has a certain capacity to do things in the immediate, a good immediate feeling, and then come back for more, and so on. After a certain time it wears off. But what's happened in the meantime is that they've become open to it being channeled into energy which has come from some unknown source. And we know full well that this unknown source is very well known to those who are in exorcism and all the rest of it. It's directly demonic, because the angels, so-called, the angels, all right, but they're not of the good sort. They're fallen angels, and so these will operate when channeled in. And these masters of it, the Reiki masters, are open at a certain point. There is an initiation going on in which they are handing over certain elements of themselves to be available for this. They're tuned in, and then they can act, and act they will, but the consequences will follow. Things start going mysteriously wrong. And when people come to you, you've got to ask them often, is there any stuff you've got involved with, any sort of New Age practice? They don't even know what it is exactly, but Reiki is it's in the parish hall, it must be okay. But it's not a bit okay. And it's not good to be giving retreats in places where these are happening, because there's stuff around there. There's a sort of a claim on these places by the demon who's been using them. And just be aware that what's happening now is that because there is no immune system in many souls, because they're not in a state of grace anymore, the confession is gone, it's not enough to have just Holy Communion. Confession also has to be there, enough to keep them clean. But otherwise it's just more complication. When communion is received, for instance, coming to a wedding or something, people coming up without confession at all. It doesn't help at all, this mess going on there. So it's all a multiplication and compounding of a dark business already. So they're easy prey for these fallen angels when it comes to exposing themselves to immediate healing in Reiki. The demon has a field day in these mal-defended souls. So that's the stuff we've got to handle, even as ordinary priests. And that can involve some sort of form of deliverance ministry. You have to handle the whole person. Just a quick blessing is not enough. You have to get involved, try and clean up the soul. And you can eventually, without going into the formal exorcism, there's a certain amount of delivery ministry which any priest can do and has to do. Of course, the demon doesn't like the Blessed Sacrament, because I have everyday benediction. It's extremely powerful benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. I just finished this, and I'll carry on this evening with regard to the power of benediction. We had a confrere who went over to Africa, and he was in a Côte d'Ivoire, a French-speaking country, and in those countries, often it's not New Age down there, but it's a form of animism. Out of closeness with where they're coming from, they still have fetishes and bits of the other stuff around. It's kind of just to be sure, just to be safe. And stuff is around there. They might have been involved with stuff. Anyway, he was in church, a packed church, and he was giving the benediction of the Blessed Sacrament one evening. And there he was, he held the Blessed Sacrament up. And as he did so, about to give the blessing, he saw before his eyes a terrifying thing. This lady, before his eyes, was elevated out of the pew, and as he was giving the blessing, she was suddenly catapulted at a colossal speed against the wall and fell down. Now, obviously there was stuff in her, not delivered. And that's what we're up against. I've heard about that kind of thing from one or two missionaries I was living with in Rome. Stuff is out there in dark Africa. And Olnick in different cultures comes up in different forms. But the witch doctor is one interference there, using powers. Reiki is one close to us, and all the baggage they have in New Age. But anything at all which is in some way colluding with the powers of the underworld, even in the cybersphere, to which we have easy access, is something we need to protect ourselves, not 99%, but 100%, using what we have classically: holy water, the sacramentals, blessed scapulars, the prayer of St. Michael, which should not have been done away with after Mass completely. John Paul II regretted that, and he wanted it reintroduced at least to a private level, because when it was removed, Satan had a field day. There was a whole defence taken away. I still use it every time I have Mass. I always say that prayer in private, or in public actually, at the end of Mass. And it's extremely powerful against the powers of the devil, because this is what we're up against. Somebody who's so clever, he's persuaded Christians massively, he simply doesn't exist.